The following segment is brought to you in partnership with Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. I got a nice visit in the studio today from, if you live in Washington, someone who will be a familiar name and face, Bill Bryant. He ran for governor in 2016 against Jay Inslee and lost. It was a difficult year, I think, for Republicans in Washington state because you had Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, and in a state where you have a blue state, first of all, and then where you have even a lot of Republicans who didn't like Donald Trump. Certainly that brought down other Republicans on the ticket, like Bill Bryant, but he wrote an op-ed recently in the Tacoma News Tribune that talked about some of the things he thinks the Republican Party needs to do moving forward, like in Washington state, separating itself from Donald Trump, like taking action to protect privacy and therefore protect the right to abortion. And so I had him into the studio this morning. We taped a lengthy conversation. Here's part of it. For people who are not familiar with you, give us the Cliff Notes.
The Cliff Notes. I was born in Morton, which is at the base of Mount Rainier, grew up over on the Olympic Peninsula in Hoodsport on Hood Canal, grew up hiking in the Olympic Mountains. Went to school, high school in Olympia, went back east to college, but moved back home as soon as I graduated, and have built a company over the last 30 years, which I sold in July. So I guess now I'm retired.
Congratulations.
And along the way, I ran for a seat on the Seattle Port Commission, was elected the only Republican elected in King County, state countywide, and then ran for governor in 2016 against Jay Inslee.
Yeah. What does retirement look like?
I love it. It looks like, well, okay. I've
And
been
is
retired.
it retirement? Okay.
Yeah, I've been retired for, a few months. And a lot of those were in the summer. So there was fly fishing, there was hiking, there was a bit of sailing. I did just got back from about a week trip in the backcountry of the Grand Canyon, doing hiking and climbing into areas into the wilderness where, the ranger, when you get your permit, says, okay, you understand you're 24 hours from rescue if it's coming at all. And I just loved it. It's so spectacular.
So would you say you're not, a lot of people retire and then I feel like they're just as busy as they were when they were working. Are you kind of keeping your hand in anything political or any sort of quote unquote work?
Yes. I'm writing a lot. And as you know, I have a column in the TNT, which is supposed to be monthly, but I just realized it's kind of slipped into every 6 weeks a few times. And I also have a column in the Spokane Inlander. So those two columns, as you can appreciate, actually the writing of it is pretty easy. Deciding what I'm going to write about is much more of a chore. What's interesting enough that people will care enough about to read, that I find more difficult. But I'm doing some writing. And yes, I have a PAC called Forge, which helps people get elected to city and county positions. It's only on local races. And we are coming up on an off-year election where we'll have city and county races. So we're beginning to look at that. And then this past cycle, I did endorse and did a little bit of fundraising for some legislative candidates.
What kind of candidates does your PAC typically support? Like, who are you looking to throw support behind usually?
We're looking for people who are in swing districts. So we're not looking at people, who are in solid Republican districts and are going to win. We're looking for people in swing districts. They tend to be in Snohomish and King County suburbs. Most recently, we've been focused almost entirely. Well, the last cycle we were focused entirely in Snohomish County, and they were all kind of running through to make sure this is correct, but they were all city council races. Okay. And we're looking for people who are ready to govern.
That's easy.
We're not looking for people who are doing this because they want to get their name out there, or people who have some grievance and some axe to grind. We're looking for people who understand that at the county and city level, what we need are competent people who want to govern and who want to listen and learn. And if they have those qualities and they want to come talk to me, I'll talk to them.
Are those easy candidates to find?
There are more people like that than you know, but unfortunately, there is no real support system for them. I think that the Democrats, particularly when Frank Chop was Speaker of the House and the legislature, did a very good job of going out and finding qualified people who identified with the Democrat Party and getting them elected to a city or a county position and get them some experience and then he would probably keep in touch with them and someday talk to them about running for the legislature. Republicans don't do that. And if, one, I just care about local government. I started my political career in local government. I actually understand that a great deal gets done at local government that affects people's daily lives, and we need competent people there. And if it has the extra advantage of building a farm team, well, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. The bench isn't very deep for Republicans. And I know there's some efforts underway to sort of try to
Yes.
try to build that bench up. But also, do sane people want to run for politics right now?
It's really ugly. People talk to me about running again. And I'm like, it's ugly out there. And it's not just ugly for the candidate. I'm a big boy and I've got pretty thick skin, but it's ugly for your family.
Yeah.
And we live in an environment with this social media where it is very difficult to ever turn it off and separate yourself from it. You and your family are constantly being barraged unless you really do just turn it off, which I tend to do. But for people who are sane, who have lives, who have families, putting themselves out in this ugly environment is a even more difficult decision than it would be normally. But there are people who are willing to do it. And we have to. I mean, democracy is not a spectator sport.
Yeah.
It only works when you get in and work it. And if you say, you know what, I got a life, I don't need this, and you walk off the field, then you're ceding it to all the yahoos who decide to stay on the field. And a lot of people aren't ready to cede the field to the crazies.
So I'll talk about 2024, but first I want to go back to 2016. This sounds like a very blunt question, but what is it like
Really, you're going to ask a blunt question?
What is it like to lose to Jay Inslee?
Oh.
Is it terrible? You're one of only a few people who know, and I'm assuming you and I share the same opinion of him, give or take.
Yeah, I've known the governor a long time because we both lived in Yakima at the same time. Barbara and I lived in Yakima for 7 years when I did international trade work for the fruit industry, and he was the state legislator from there, and then for one term, the congressman. What is it like to lose to him? It's sad, but not in a sad. The sadness I felt was not, oh, I sad I lost. It was really, and I think Barbara would feel this way too. It was really because our lives will go on, and I had the company, and we got other things we can do. But it was a sadness at the opportunity lost.
Yeah.
Because this state is an incredible state with incredible potential that we are not realizing. And the fact that we were going to turn this state over to him for 4 more years of, at best, treading water, maybe on some important things going backwards. And it's not what he does so much, although I disagree with stuff that he does. It's what he doesn't do. And there are so many opportunities we could be seizing to move this state forward that we're just not. And so I think that the opportunity lost, what we weren't going to be doing because he was reelected, was the sadness.
How much of it was him winning on his merits versus just him winning because he's a Democrat?
Oh, in 2016, most of it was him winning because he was a Democrat.
Because Trump was on the ticket.
Because Trump was on the ticket. In January of 2016, I mean, and I'm going to get this wrong. Frankly, you and I are talking about this more than I've thought about it in a while. But if I think I'm right. In January of 16, Stu Elway came out with a poll that roughly showed Jay Inslee at, let's call it 38%, and Bill Bryant at like 32, 34, and like 30 some undecided, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. Jay was in the high 30s, I was in the low 30s, and like the rest were undecided. And I was like, damn, game on.
Yeah.
I mean, we got an incumbent who's not only under 50, he's under 40.
Yeah.
And people didn't even really know me then, and I had over a third that wanted to support me. So we were very confident. We had a really strong fundraising effort in February, March, maybe early April. But I remember the day that not Tom Cruise, the other Kruse.
Why are you thinking of Tom Cruise?
Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz. Those are very different Cruises,
people, yes.
and I am also a different Cruz.
Right. Ted Cruz and Rubio and a few other candidates all dropped out within like 2 or 3 days of each other.
Yeah.
And our fundraising just dried up. A lot of people just said, well, we're out of here. And then we kind of came back. And at the end of June, there was a poll that put us really within striking distance. We were in, I think, somewhere in the mid 40s or something like that. And then after the Republican convention, you could just see it starting to drop on the suburbs of King County.
Yeah. I don't recall the time you and I were discussing before we started how that was kind of when I was just switching over to covering politics full time. Did you come out forcefully against Trump while you were running?
I did, but I didn't feel I needed to get up every morning and remind everyone of that and
Yes.
talk about that, because that's all Jay wanted to talk about and all the media wanted to talk
All
about.
he still wants to talk about.
Right. In January of 2016, before any of the presidential primaries, I made it clear that I did not think Mr. Trump was competent to be president of the United States. I wanted to focus on issues that were important to the governor's race and Washington. And I thought the more I talked about whether I liked Trump or not, the more I was playing into Jay Inslee's game plan.
Yeah.
And the media was perfectly willing to play into Jay Inslee's game plan. I remember one time a TV reporter came and said, Bill, I want to do a piece on education reform. And my producer or whatever has given me X number of minutes, which was a lot of minutes. Call it 3 or 4, I don't know. But it was as much as you're going to get on the evening news. And I knew that Jay would get part of it, so maybe I've got 1.5, 2 minutes, still a lot on the evening news. And we probably talked for 20 minutes about how this state needs to ensure that every kid, regardless of where they grow up, has an equal education, and that we don't. And even after Jay's Band-Aid on McCleary, we still don't. But it was a thoughtful conversation about education reform. And at the very end, he said, oh, and do you have anything more to say about, Trump? And I can't remember what I said, but that was the only piece of the whole interview he used.
Wow.
So the media played into that game plan as well.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult because I wanted to talk about issues that really affected the lives of people all across the state. And too many people just wanted to talk about the Clinton-Trump race.
Yeah. So would you rule out running for governor again?
Show me how we win.
So you wouldn't rule it out, but if you felt like you wouldn't rule it out, is what I'm hearing.
Well, I'm
if
too
you
young
knew
to
you could
rule
win.
anything out, but that don't twist that around, because that's a long way from
Yeah.
saying I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, but I'm sure people still bring it up to you.
Oh yeah.
When you saw Lauren Culp become the party's nominee in 2020, and he did very poorly. As someone who came closer than that and who is inarguably more qualified, was it hard to see? And I'm not trying to, Lauren Culp is not my type of political candidate, but he's always been pleasant to me. And so I certainly don't want to speak poorly about him as a person. But was it hard to see that be the person that the party put up against Jay in a third term?
I don't know if it was hard or if I even thought about it that way. I did think that once it happened, this was probably a good exercise for the Washington State Republican Party to go through. Not because I thought he had any chance of winning, which he didn't. But there were, and unfortunately there probably still are, some people who said I would have won if I were more Trumpy, if I'd embraced Trump, even though president nominee candidate Trump in 2016 got 30-some% of the vote in Washington State. I got in the 40s. But that I needed to support Trump more. I needed to be angrier. I needed to, kind of shout and be more dramatic, and I needed to be more Trumpy, and I need to be a hell of a lot more conservative. Although I don't quite know what that means, because I think of myself as a true conservative, at least. Well, they got that. So I was like, okay, You know, if I'm on a dial of 1 to 10 and I was at a 6, you got your guy at 9 or 10 right now. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
And we saw how it went.
Yeah.
So are you going to say, well, he should have been what, more Trumpy? I mean, I hope that people will take a lesson away from that, but I'm not sure that they have, because there are some people in the state who think that the reason why the Republicans didn't do better in this last election is that they were not mad enough.
Yeah, they're not aggressive enough. And I will say, there is a certain part of me, I don't think it has to do with being mad. There is a certain part of me that just looks at the way both sides campaign, and Democrats do it so much better. I mean, Democrats define Republicans out the gate. I feel like Republicans are always on the defensive. And so I would like to see them be not madder, but more aggressive in countering some of those Democratic narratives that I didn't think were fair.
I do too. I think we have to be much more aggressive. One of the reasons why we didn't do better in this most recent election is I don't think people fully appreciate what the Republican Party stands for. Okay. We didn't have a platform in the last national election. It was kind of like, well, whatever he says, we agree with.
Yeah.
And that's not a platform, and it's not sustainable. You need to tell people what you believe in and go out and defend it and brand yourself. Don't let them brand you.
Yeah.
And until we get there, and you can't brand yourself unless you know what you believe in, but until we get there, they're going to continue to paint us whatever the color paint they want to put on.
What do you think? I know you can't broad brush the entire party, but how truly do you think the Washington State Republican Party compares to the National Party? Not how you think they should brand themselves, but who is the Washington GOP, in your opinion?
I don't know. Is it the state party chair? I don't think he sees himself as being sort of the image of the party, and rightfully so. Is it the legislative leaders? We have great legislative leaders in Representative Braun, or State Senator Braun, and J.T. Wilcox, State Representative Wilcox. But I don't know if they see themselves as the flag bearers of the overall party.
But even not your standard bearer, but if you could say this is sort of the quintessential Washington State Republican, even if it's a manufactured person, who is that person?
I don't know. The Republican Party right now is a coalition of a lot of different groups. You have people who are more recently come to the party who are supporters of the former president, who might not have been very involved before, but have become more involved since. They don't necessarily have any attachment to the older party, or what they would label the establishment. Then you have that older party, that establishment, which is made up of true conservative voters who are concerned about the direction of our state. Then you've got kind of what some would brand as the mainstream, more moderate group, which for a long time when I was growing up was the Republican Party in Washington State. Is there someone who can bridge that rural-urban, that conservative, and that mainstream coalition? I don't know who that person is.
So even if, let's just say, you're not going to run in 2024, you can't think of someone right now who you think would be the best option.
Well, I don't want to throw out anybody's name if they're not thinking about doing it. That's
throw out
not
their
fair.
name.
No, people throw out my name all the time, and then your phone starts ringing. It's like, I didn't say that. He said that.
So there are some people in your noggin, but you don't want to talk. You don't want.
Oh, there's one person who I think would be very good.
What if I guess it on the first try?
You can't.
You don't think I would?
Oh, you might be able to, but I'm not going to tell you whether you're right or not.
Dave Reichert?
Oh, I was not thinking of Congressman Reichert. I don't want to speak for Dave, but I don't think so.
Okay. I'll ponder. For the presidency in 2024, you and I are both in agreement that Trump.
Time to move on.
It's been time to move on.
And if we didn't have enough reason to move on, his statement regarding suspending the Constitution should it should be cause for everyone to say it's time for him to move on.
Yeah. Let's talk about the most recent op-ed you did for the Tacoma News Tribune. What do you think is the most effective way? If the Washington State Republican Party says, yes, we agree, this is in the best interest of our success and our viability moving into 2024, how do you think that they make that clear distinction? What form should that take? Do they come out and do a press conference? Do they just passively distance themselves from him?
No, I think they need to let voters know that the party is moving on. In my op-ed in Sunday's Tacoma News Tribune, I suggested that the state party write a letter to the former president of Mar-a-Lago and just publicly say that we acknowledge your service as being president for 4 years and want you to know that in Washington State, we will be looking for a different nominee in 2024.
Do you have somebody in mind who you think would be a good Republican nominee?
I don't. There are a lot of people on the field. Not all of them have been tested nationally. Not all of them represent a constituency that necessarily can be nationalized.
Who are you referring to?
Well, I mean, I don't. People are very kind of bullish on DeSantis right now, and this is nothing against Governor DeSantis at all. But any governor of Florida or Texas, I think, is going to struggle to take that persona and nationalize it.
Interesting.
Iowa is not Florida. Washington State is not
Nowhere
Florida.
is Florida. Florida is Florida.
So, that doesn't mean he can't, but
Yeah.
it means you can't just be the same kind of person and expect it to play in Michigan or Ohio or in New Mexico or in Nevada, states you need to pick up. Doesn't mean you can't do it. I just haven't seen that pivot yet. And that would be true for some other governors who are looking at it. And if you want to look on the other side, that would be true of Governor Hogan or former Governor Hogan in Maryland. What works in Maryland might not work in Nevada. And running for president requires someone who can pivot and position themselves so that they appeal to voters beyond their normal base in their own state.
Yeah, I like Governor Hogan. I wrote an op-ed saying I'd like him and then to run with a VP is Miami Mayor Francis Suarez, who I'm just thoroughly impressed by. But I do agree that I wonder if Governor Hogan has like the fortitude to sort of drive the message home, but we'll see. I mean, it sounds like he's going to get in. In 2024, again, there are some Democrats that we know are going to run for governor. Bob Ferguson, Dow Constantine, Hillary Franz. Do any of those particularly worry you, where you would think the state will go in a poor direction if that's the person we go with?
Well, and I think one of the best things about Governor Inslee, at least in my opinion, is that he doesn't work real hard at getting a lot done. And
It was very, I could tell you wanted to word that another way, but
those candidates that you mentioned, at least two of the three, will work hard to get things done. And it may not be some of the things that we would like to see get done. So
who of the three would not work hard to get things done?
I'll let you figure that one out.
Oh, you can't just drop that stuff and then expect me to figure out who you think is lazy of the three of them.
Lazy. I just think two of them are pretty damn Energizer bunnies. And there's if we tread water under Jay, that may be better than swimming backwards. And I think we might swim backwards under some of those candidates.